Hello everybody, my name is Veronica. For those of you who don't know me, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm an artist, illustrator and Skillshare teacher based in Berlin. And in today's video I wanted to show you how I design botanical or floral compositions in Procreate. I'm teaching this technique in my most recent Skillshare class. It's a platform for online classes, online tutorials. And this particular class, I actually teach it in German. That's why I wanted to make an extra mini tutorial in English for my YouTube channel. The class, if you're interested, is about creating such botanical compositions using multiple layers in Procreate. So the big focus of this class is also how to use layers in Procreate. I will include all the links in the description box. There will be links to Skillshare classes, and one of those days I will also create a blog post on my website where I describe the entire process of how I organize and structure my whole composition in Procreate to arrive at such an end illustration. Yeah, but today I wanted to show you how I design such botanical compositions on 3 examples. We can open this illustration. This is the illustration from the Skillshare class that I just told you about. I wanted to show you how I got at the end result, how I did the planning, how I did the sketching, because this illustration is relatively detailed, and some students who consider themselves beginner, they feel maybe a little bit intimidated by this level of detail. I wanted to show you my approach. It's a very easy one. It's a technique that I kind of developed for myself a long time ago. I am pretty sure a lot of illustrators might have a similar technique because I think such drawing techniques are pretty intuitive, so to say. So if you see someone using a similar technique, then don't quote me that I claim it entirely. I'm sure a lot of artists out there design their compositions in a very similar way, I can imagine. Yes, I wanted to show you this technique, but before, if you're watching this video, I would kindly like to ask you to please comment so that I know that you're here and that you're watching this mini tutorial. If you're here, please comment magical florals in the comment section below. I also hope you like this mini tutorial, you like this video, and you subscribe to my YouTube channel because I'm planning to upload more mini tutorials and mini classes apart from my activity on Skillshare. Okay, so let's begin. This is the end illustration. I wanted to open the layers panel to show you how I went about designing this composition. I have a layer here that I have named shapes. Right now it's invisible, but let's make it visible. And let's go to this layer with the illustration, and let's reduce the opacity. Yeah, so this is the first step I always take whenever I plan such a botanical illustration. I usually choose a brush that is a little bit thicker, for example, dry ink or a monoline brush. Dry ink has a little bit of texture to it, I like it a lot. And then I usually have my color palette ready for the flower that I want to draw, and I take any of the vibrant colors to block in some shapes. I usually make circles for planning in my bigger flowers. So this is, for example, flower number 1. This is flower number 2, which is also quite circular, but it's a little bit smaller. And apart from using circles, I'm also using ovals, especially for the flowers that are a little bit off the center of the composition. They're a little bit to the side, like this one and this one. I hope you can see that. And I'm also using triangles. You can see it in yellow. I like to change my colors. And this is just a general shape. So circle, circle, triangle, oval, oval. Then I imagined that this side of the rest of the illustration will have some oval berries. So I only placed, I think it's called a placeholder. Yeah, like a placeholder shape to indicate that I would like to have some berries here. Let me go back to the original illustration. You will see that indeed there are some berries in here and the big circular flowers. Yeah, lowering the opacity again. Then I marked with the little circles where I want some extra berries. So I was building from the center to the outside. I started with the big blooms, and it's always a good idea to go in 3. I think 3 is if there were just 2 flowers here, I like 3. I think it creates a very nice balance. And when I selected, or when I drew the shapes for the big flowers, 1, 2, 3, I wanted to populate those areas that were empty. And this is a very good place to place your berries over here. And once this was done, I changed the color to some green color, and I marked more or less how I would like to have the shape of my leaves. I only indicated that those green shapes will be leaves, and I knew there's probably going to be more. And what I really like to do, you will see that pretty much in all the classes that I teach, is when I'm planning my composition, I love using arrows. So I place some arrows that I basically showing that my composition is growing from the center and it's growing outwards to the edges of the illustration, so to say. I wasn't sure, let's call them secondary leaves. I wasn't sure about their shape yet. In the end, you will see that the shape looks like this. They're a little bit more, let's say, elaborate compared to the shapes over here. And because I wasn't sure, I didn't let this stage to stop me in my planning. Like, this is usually where beginner artists experience that they're having a block. But the arrows allow me to keep this stage simple. And indeed, when I switch off the final illustration, you will see, okay, it's a little bit busy, but I am still able to read it. How am I going to read it? Big flower, number 1, right? Big flower, number 2. Another quite big flower, number 3, which is more triangle, probably moving also in that direction outside of the canvas. Berries, berries, berries as fillers. Maybe some extra secondary smaller blooms that are a little bit oval, maybe they're in the background. Very rough leaf shapes, and then probably some filler leaves which are represented by those arrows over here. And then I lowered the opacity of those shapes and I did the sketch. Let's make it maybe a little bit more, let's say, vibrant here, the shapes again, and lower the sketch. And zoom in a little bit. So here, as you see, is my big flower. This circle was merely a placeholder. Of course, I can go outside of the circle, but the initial shapes allow me to design better a composition that is pleasing to me, that is central, that has those 3 central flowers and a good proportion, so to say, of all those fillers around. Do you see here? There's this arrow that only indicated where my leaves could be. And here in the sketch, I decided, okay, and instead of the arrow, I need to decide on the shape. And this is where I already built the shape of the leaf. Those were the berries. They were supposed to be more or less here where you see the shapes. I moved them a little bit. And the small berries, again, that was a placeholder. Let's get rid of the colors. I was able to sketch them with, let's say, a little bit more of a detail. Let's make the sketch again more visible. And this already looks quite nice and maybe still a little bit messy, but I was able to develop such a nice composition because first I started simple with the forms. And thanks to that, I was able to create a composition and end illustration that looks like that. Let's go back to the gallery and let me show you our second example. This one is a little bit more elaborate. I really like this illustration. The other one was a little bit more flat. This one, I decided to render it with a little bit of shading. Oh, I love it. I also wanted to create a composition that is in an oval, and over here I have created, or I have made use of a few other techniques. Let's hide the final composition, and I wanted to show you the initial composition because I'm working here with an extra, I call it control square, let's say. It's basically a square. I have a stamp brush over here that is basically a square. Yeah, when you go back and you make full opacity, you will see it's just a square, and if I lower the opacity, then it gives me a very nice frame. I work with squares like that because they give me a nice frame. You will see that all the elements that I have designed here, put into my composition, they do not go outside of the edges of the square. This is another layer for the forms. I'm using circles for bigger flowers. There's flower number 1, number 2, and number 3. I also have some other filler flowers that are more oval in shape, 4 and 5. I want the berries to be on the upper left side of the composition, and I want some extra flowers which will be more triangular in shape, which is here number 7 and number 8. And I didn't even mark here the shape of the leaves. I basically just drew the arrows. If we go back to the final illustration, you just see those leaves indeed go they kind of point in this outward direction. And after I was done with the forms, I was able to work on the sketch. Let's lower the opacity again. Now it gets a little bit more busy, but if I zoomed in, you would see this is the forms circle, and indeed I drew a big flower here. There's a middle flower here, and it's quite within the initial circle that I drew. There's another big flower, and you see this arrow from the forms. Wait, let's go back. Yeah, so I pretty much follow this scheme. Another arrow here. I knew that the berries will be here, but this time I decided on the shape, which is a little bit like a star-shaped. And also this arrow, I drew another leaf. And this arrow, I drew another leaf. So I hope by now you can see how it works for me. I start with very rough forms. Then I lower the opacity of this forms layer. And then, actually I do it usually on top, so we can hold this layer and put it on top. And then I work on the sketch right on top of those shapes. And when I don't need them, I switch them off and my sketch is ready. I block in the colors for the color thumbnail. And what I also like to do after by the way, this is just a sneak peek to the end process of the illustration. Maybe I can make a video about that. If you're interested, please comment under this video, then maybe I can make a dedicated video about what I'm doing here. I'm basically having an extra layer with gray color to test if I like the contrast of the colors. Yeah, if I switch it off, you just have the original illustration. So from that, I ended up with this illustration. And one last example, but I think by now you already know how it works. For this illustration, I actually used a triangle. I hope you can see that. I cannot reduce the opacity of this illustration, but I knew, let's switch it off. I knew that I want a composition that will be contained within a triangle. So this is the shape that I started with. One flower here, one flower there, one middle flower, and the rest, what I did, I only marked the arrows. And I knew, okay, it's important for me that it's going to stay within that triangle actually. So now we have our shapes layer in red and the sketch. That was the first circle that I used, and this is the flower that I came up. I was using just a rough, I think I was using the 6B pencil for the sketch. This is another flower. I was just blocking in some rough shapes. And the arrows that I drew for my direction, I populated, so to say, those arrows with those leaf shapes. And I knew that I also want some berry-like twigs. And the arrows only gave me the direction. That's it. Let's go back to the original illustration. This is just the texture. Get rid of the sketch and the shapes. Go back with the triangle. And oops. This is the end result. This is a composition that I designed that fits a triangle shape. When I was done with painting, I also created this control gray kind of, what is it? It's a square, yeah. A gray square. That also gave me a very nice frame. As you can see, nothing goes to the edges of the illustration. I like it that way. I like it that all those leaves that are most on the outside, they're not entirely touching the frame, but they have a little bit of a distance. Like a triangle. Here is one corner, second corner, and the third corner. Yeah. This is the end result. That's it. This is pretty simple and straightforward, and I can kind of guarantee that if you start using this technique and planning your illustration, then I think your compositions will improve quite a lot. It's a very, very handy technique, not only for the florals, but particularly for botanical compositions. I found it super, super useful because I think botanical illustrations, they really look most beautiful and charming when they have a lot of detail, right? You can paint big blooms and all the small blooms and all the berries, but instead of, you know, getting stuck and feeling completely blocked at the beginning and overwhelmed about how to organize this beautiful chaos, you can use the technique that I just shown to you. Great! If you watched the entire video, please comment magical florals in the comment section below. Also, if you would like to show me how I do the control square with the gray color to check the contrast of the illustration, if you would like me to create such a video for you, you can also leave a comment below. And I hope that you like the examples that I have shown to you. And I will see you in the next mini class. Happy drawing!